Adolf Hitler stands as a symbol of humanity's darkest potential, a figure whose actions have left an indelible mark on history. His name is forever linked to genocide, totalitarianism, and a world war that claimed tens of millions of lives. The sheer scale of the atrocities committed under his regime is almost incomprehensible. His crimes were unprecedented, methodical, state-sponsored, and rooted in a fanatical pursuit of racial purity and power. The Nazi propaganda machine worked tirelessly to dehumanize entire populations. The Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others, was executed with chilling efficiency, leaving a scar on the collective conscience of humanity. World War II not only redrew the map of the world through devastation, but also reshaped global politics and societies in ways that are still felt today. Hitler's rise was not inevitable. It was enabled by Germany's defeat in World War I, economic collapse, and political chaos. The Treaty of Versailles left Germany humiliated and economically crippled. His promises of national restoration and scapegoating of minorities resonated deeply with a populace desperate for change and stability. These promises found fertile ground in a nation desperate for answers, leading to a fervent and dangerous nationalism. Studying Hitler is not about sympathizing with evil, but about understanding how such catastrophe can emerge and how to prevent it. It is a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked hatred and power. His legacy is a warning. Vigilance against hatred and tyranny is essential to safeguard our future. We must remember the past to ensure that such darkness never falls upon the world again. Born in the small Austrian town of Braunau am Inn in 1889, Adolf Hitler entered the world in a region marked by tradition and change. His early years were shaped by a strict father and a loving mother, and he grew up with a sense of both discipline and longing for recognition. As a teenager, Hitler dreamed of becoming a great artist. He moved to Vienna, hoping to study at the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts. But his ambitions were quickly dashed. He was rejected twice, leaving him humiliated and adrift. These failures haunted him, fueling a growing sense of bitterness and alienation. In Vienna, Hitler struggled to survive, living in shelters and scraping by on odd jobs. During these years, he was exposed to the city's political turmoil and the rise of radical ideologies. He absorbed the toxic mix of pan-German nationalism and virulent anti-Semitism that was spreading through Austrian society at the time. When World War I broke out, Hitler enlisted in the German army, finally finding a sense of belonging and purpose. The war was brutal, but it gave his life direction. However, Germany's defeat in 1918 shattered his hopes and left him embittered, searching for someone to blame. He became increasingly susceptible to conspiracy theories that blamed Jews and politicians for the nation's humiliation. After the war, Germany was in chaos. Hitler, now a disillusioned veteran, discovered his talent for public speaking. He joined the small German Workers' Party, where his fiery speeches and charisma quickly made him indispensable. He found an audience eager for answers and someone to blame for their suffering. Hitler soon took control, transforming the party into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. He designed its infamous symbols, crafted its propaganda, and built a paramilitary wing, the SA, to intimidate and silence opponents. The movement began to grow rapidly, fueled by anger and fear. In 1923, Hitler made his first attempt to seize power in the failed Munich Putsch. The coup collapsed and he was arrested, landing him in Landsberg prison. While imprisoned, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, a manifesto that laid out his vision of racial supremacy, anti-Semitism, and conquest. This book would become the blueprint for the horrors that followed. The failures, resentments, and radical ideas of Hitler's early life became the foundation for a movement that would soon engulf Germany and change the course of history forever. After prison, Hitler shifted tactics, seeking power through legal means rather than violent revolution. The Nazi Party remained marginal until the Great Depression shattered Germany, creating mass unemployment and despair. Hitler exploited this chaos, promising order, jobs, and national pride, while blaming scapegoats for Germany's woes. Nazi propaganda and street intimidation fueled their rise, and by 1932, they were the largest party in the Reichstag. Conservative elites, believing they could control Hitler, convinced President Hindenburg to appoint him chancellor in January 1933. This was a fatal error. Hitler immediately began dismantling democracy. The Weimar Republic collapsed, and a totalitarian dictatorship emerged almost overnight. Hitler's ascent was a lesson in how democracy can be destroyed from within. Once in power, Hitler knew control required more than laws. It demanded the hearts and minds of the people. Joseph Goebbels led a relentless propaganda campaign, saturating every medium with Nazi ideology. Radios, newspapers, and films became tools to glorify Hitler and demonize enemies, especially Jews. Massive rallies and omnipresent symbols fostered unity and obedience, while education and youth organizations indoctrinated the next generation. The regime blurred the line between information and propaganda, making dissent nearly impossible. Every aspect of daily life was Nazified, ensuring loyalty to the Führer. Hitler's control over culture and thought was as total as his grip on the state. Propaganda won hearts, but terror secured obedience. The SS, led by Heinrich Himmler, became the regime's enforcers, running concentration camps and executing racial policy with fanaticism. The Gestapo, though small, wielded immense power by fostering fear, encouraging citizens to inform on each other, making trust impossible. A careless word could mean torture or death. Society was paralyzed by suspicion. Early concentration camps targeted political opponents, using brutality as a warning to all. The threat of arrest and violence silenced millions, dismantling organized resistance. Propaganda and terror worked in tandem, transforming Germany into a dictatorship ruled by fear. Dissent was atomized, and the will of the Führer became absolute law. Hitler's regime thrived on a culture where silence and complicity were the only means of survival. With Germany firmly under his control, Adolf Hitler set out to overturn the fragile order established after World War I. Driven by a vision of German expansion and dominance, he was determined to erase the humiliations of the Treaty of Versailles and restore Germany's power on the world stage. Hitler began by openly violating international agreements, rearming the military, remilitarizing the Rhineland in 1936, and orchestrating the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria, in 1938. Each bold move was met with little resistance, encouraging him to push further. Western democracies, still haunted by the horrors of the Great War, hesitated to confront him. Britain and France, led by Neville Chamberlain and Édouard Daladier, adopted a policy of appeasement, hoping that satisfying Hitler's demands would prevent another devastating conflict. But Hitler saw their concessions not as gestures of peace, but as signs of weakness. The Munich Agreement of 1938, which handed him the Sudetenland, was celebrated in London as a triumph for peace, but in reality it only fueled his ambitions. Within months, Hitler broke his promises and invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia in 1939, demonstrating that his appetite for conquest was far from satisfied. The world watched in disbelief as German troops occupied new territories. That summer, in a shocking twist, Hitler signed a non-aggression pact with Joseph Stalin, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This agreement stunned the world, as two bitter ideological enemies now pledged not to attack each other. Secretly, the pact included a plan to divide Poland between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. With this deal in place, Hitler was free to launch his next campaign of aggression, confident that the Soviets would not interfere. As news of these events spread, fear and uncertainty gripped Europe. Newspapers blared headlines of impending war, and anxious crowds gathered in cities, sensing that peace was slipping away. Western leaders, having underestimated the scale of Hitler's ambitions, now faced the consequences of their inaction. Hitler's calculated gambles and the West's reluctance to act decisively had brought the world to the edge of disaster. The policy of appeasement had failed utterly, and Hitler's unchecked aggression would soon plunge the globe into the most destructive conflict in human history, World War II. The Holocaust was the ultimate expression of Nazi ideology, a state-orchestrated genocide targeting Jews and millions of others. Persecution began with discriminatory laws and social exclusion, escalating to violence with Kristallnacht. As war spread, Jews were forced into ghettos, then transported to extermination camps like Auschwitz. The Wannsee Conference formalized the final solution, the industrialized murder of European Jewry. Victims arrived in cattle cars, most sent directly to gas chambers, a few were worked to death. The Holocaust stands as a singular rupture in history, where bureaucracy, technology, and hatred converged to commit mass murder. Its legacy is a permanent scar and a warning to humanity. On September 1, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, igniting World War II. Blitzkrieg tactics brought rapid victories across Europe, leaving Britain isolated but defiant. The war expanded globally after Hitler invaded the Soviet Union and declared war on the United States. Cities were destroyed, millions displaced, and the Eastern Front became a theater of unimaginable brutality. Hitler's ambitions outpaced his resources. Defeats at Stalingrad and Normandy marked the turning point. The Third Reich collapsed as Allied forces closed in from east and west. In April 1945, with Berlin in ruins, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. His death ended a reign that left Europe shattered and the world forever changed. Hitler's defeat did not erase his legacy. The world was left to reckon with the scale of his crimes. The Nuremberg trials set new standards for justice, while the United Nations was founded to prevent future atrocities. The memory of Hitler and the Holocaust is a warning about the fragility of democracy and the dangers of hatred. Ordinary people can become complicit in evil through action, ideology, or silence. Remembering this history is essential to safeguarding the future. In an age of misinformation and polarization, the lessons of the 1930s remain urgent. Education and vigilance are our best defenses against tyranny. By honoring the victims and telling their stories, we reaffirm our vow never again